So again, good evening. My name is Rebecca Davis. I am the Director of Transition Projects at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. We are the Massachusetts Parent Training and Information Center. We are a one-stop shop for so much information about healthcare, special education for young people with disabilities and their families from birth all the way up to the age of 26 and beyond. We don't turn anyone away. We're really excited this evening in our Connecting Families series. It's a monthly series where we talk about different topics. And this month we're trying something where with addressing young people, transition age youth, ages 14 and up and beyond, teenagers and young adults, talking about topics that are meaningful to them. And something that we find a lot in our intake calls is how do folks socialize now? How do our young people post COVID and in this world, how do they make new friends? And I had the great opportunity of meeting Christina Gravina recently at a resource fair. Christina is the CEO and co-founder of Bridging Independent Living Together, or BILT. It's an organization that enriches the lives of people with disabilities through compassionate support. And she was telling me about the presentations she does. And one of them is about, how do you make friends and how do you socialize? And we just assume that these things will happen, but sometimes people need a little help. So I've seen this presentation. I really hope that if you're a parent, you might want to sit down with your young person and have them watch the recording. I think Christina has a lot to tell us. She is the CEO and founder of BILT. She is a board certified behavior analyst with a master's in education and curriculum and design in applied behavior analysis. And she has worked in the human service field for the past 15 years. So Christina has a lot to tell us and we will be listening. Christina, take it away.
Great,
Oh,
thanks so much.
I'm so sorry. If you are listening, please go ahead and mute yourself, just in case, so we can all hear her presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so today we are going to be discussing the road to independence, breaking down communication, red flags in friendship, finding your community, body language, and consent and boundaries. So like Rebecca had said, this presentation really is catered for individuals that are in transition age, that are heading off into the world, but also I put in some different tips in here that families can follow and they can use some situations to talk about when uncomfortable situations arise as your young person is going out into the world. So the first thing to know about is that we're more alike than different. I get a lot of individuals that have autism or developmental disabilities that have been told that friendships are not a priority to them, or maybe that, friendships are just too hard. And it's really important to know that biologically, humans are a social species. So what this means is that deep down, we all want to connect socially with other humans and have relationships. It's a complete myth that individuals with autism aren't interested in friendships. Usually what happens with friendships is that the individual might have a lack of social skills. They might have a lack of, conversating skills. They might have a lack of varied interests that other people can understand or conversate on, but it's not that they don't want friends. In general, making friends as an adult, it's scary and it's intimidating and it feels really overwhelming for everybody, not just people that have disabilities. And so it's important to stress, and I stress this to all of our young people, that everyone is new at everything at one point in their life. And so unless we kind of put ourselves out there, unless we get into new experiences, we're not going to grow as people. College and entering adulthood, a change of programs, a change from the school system. It's a great opportunity to make lifelong friends, but also make friends that maybe aren't in your general, school system, or people that you've kind of been friends with because they're around you. And that's really one of the only shared interests that are in place. So the road to independence, I have found that with individuals, it's really helpful to actually define what is independent living and what is independence. I feel we throw around the word independence a lot. School systems do, parents do, and individuals kind of don't always know what it means to be independent. So, teenage and entering into adulthood, it's a chance for independence, increasing social skill set, discovering more about a sense of self, and increasing independent living skills. But we need to break down what independent living means. So, I've created this chart which is called the steps to being becoming independent. And I have used this chart with a lot of young people that talk to me about how they want to be on their own, they want to live independently, they feel they're being independent, and they don't know why they're being held back by maybe their parents or by a program or what it is that is the problem. So this definitely doesn't incorporate everything you need to live independently, but it's a really good way to show that there are different benchmarks that have to be met in order to be able to live independently. And so when we're looking at the chart, the first one that comes up a lot is maintaining hygiene. So, are we showering? Do we need to be prompted to shower? A lot of young people go through a stage where maybe showering isn't their top priority, but this affects them negatively in many different avenues in work, at school, whatever they're doing. Participating in their household. So, can they do chores? Do they know how to adhere to a house rule or a house boundary? Can they complete their own laundry? Things like that. Appropriate communication. So things like, can they utilize coping skills? Are they able to effectively say what they need? Are they able to apologize to another person if they did something wrong? Professionalism at work. So being able to follow the rules of the job site. Again, maintaining hygiene, participating in activities. Safety in the home. So can we be home alone safe? Do we know who to call if someone tries to break in? Taking medications appropriately. Are you taking them? Do you know what you're prescribed? And essentially, if we do all of these things, we can have an independent living site, right? Where the individual is able to do things. Maybe they can't cook a 5 course meal, but they can make, a grilled cheese or they can make burgers. So independence is going to look different for everybody, but by having sort of measurable benchmarks that individuals can say, okay, I need to accomplish most of these in order to be more independent, in order to gain my parents' trust. There is dignity in risk, and this is something I talk to a lot of parents about. It's very hard to let go, and I understand that. A lot of parents have been fighting for their children their whole life, making sure they have all the opportunities that everybody else has. But we have to remember that there is dignity in risk. I always, at Built, we take a lot of individuals out to a lot of different places, and I always get asked, well, what if it goes wrong? Um, and I say then it goes wrong. And we figured out that that's not a good activity for them. And we try again the next day. But it's okay to fail. It's okay to figure things out. All young people are going to go through this period where they need to figure things out on their own. They need to navigate a situation themselves, and we can support them, but we have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's helpful and we're not sheltering them from being able to really make decisions or to fail. Coming up with a plan for communication and check-ins with your individual as they're going into a new environment is really important. I've worked with a lot of families where maybe, an individual has just started out at a college program and the family is calling them every single day and driving them crazy, right? And so now what happens is the individual shuts down communication and they're not responding at all. Or sometimes it could be the opposite, right? An individual is in a new environment and they're anxious and they're calling their family 17 times a day. And the family saying, please utilize your resources. I have to work. I can't keep answering all these phone calls. So it's really good to set up some sort of plan ahead of time on how communication is going to work. And what can parents do to prepare for their individual going into a more independent environment or even a new environment? So, one of the first things is to ensure the individual has had multiple opportunities to practice living independently in a safe way. And again, this is going to look different for everybody. Some parents might start off with they leave their child alone after they've proven they have safety skills for maybe a couple days. Maybe it's an hour to start off, maybe it's just 15 minutes, but giving them a chance to actually show that they know how to use these skills that they've worked so hard for. Providing least restrictive supports as much as possible. So if the individual only needs help with certain things, we need to stop ourselves from doing everything for them, right? We also kind of want to break habits that some school systems have taught. So I get a lot of young adults that they come to me and they'll say things like, "Can I use the bathroom?" Use the bathroom. You shouldn't have to ask someone to use the bathroom. I have full trust that you can use the bathroom appropriately and come back. And sometimes when individuals hear this message, it's like, oh, wow, no one's ever told me this in my whole entire life. So offering them that chance to be independent. Again, practice makes perfect, so we need to support and allow for problem solving. And this is a big one. We know, especially as parents, that we can jump into the situation and we can handle it and we can get everything fixed for them. But that's not really teaching the individual anything. So we really need to back off and allow for them to at least attempt to come up with solutions. And this is something we do a lot at Built. An individual will come to me even and simply say something like, "I've misplaced my backpack." Okay, well, what are some solutions you can think of to figure out this problem right now before I help you? You want to ensure that natural supports are in the new environment as much as possible. So maybe you have an individual that is renting their first apartment and you have a friend that lives nearby that you can drop in and check on them once in a while if needed. You don't have to pay them, they're just dropping in. Or maybe if it's college, they go to a support center or there's a accommodations office that they can tap into if they need help. And this is a question I always ask people to think about when they're thinking about their individual. And if their individual is struggling in a new environment, is do we need to lower the demand or do we need to increase the support? Because just because someone is struggling doesn't mean that it's an impossible feat. It just means that we need to look at this and what this person needs to be successful. So this is a real life example of an individual we worked with. I've changed all identifying factors, but this is an example of a lot of times what we run into with young people, especially if they have autism and they're navigating college. So Lucy is a teenager with autism who is able to drive, has been able to hold a part-time job at a grocery store, and wants to go to college. Lucy has a history of struggling with executive functioning skills and maintaining her hygiene. She does not complete any independent living skills without prompting and has in her whole life. She does not have any friends but would like to make friends, and she enjoys watching TV. When Lucy graduates at 18 and her parents encourage her to enroll in college, her parents inform the school of the accommodations in her IEP, and they believe that the college will make sure the accommodations are met. Her parents also assume that living in a dorm will be a good experience and peers will let Lucy know if she isn't doing something right. They begin picking up Lucy once a week from college and taking her to dinner, and they start to notice that some things seem off. So within 3 months, Lucy has not been attending classes. She's been staying up all night watching TV and then unable to get up the next day. She's not keeping her dorm space clean. She's not showering and she's not eating appropriately. It's important to note that, especially in college, college does not have the same supports as high school. Many colleges have policies that the student must engage with the accommodations office or reach out for assistance when needed. And if nobody knows to prompt the student to ask for these accommodations or to ask for help, then they're not going to be getting this help that they need. It's not a guarantee that the college is going to check in with the student or that the accommodations that were listed in their IEP are going to be made for every single professor this person has. So when my team had gone in and first worked with Lucy, we walked into a very difficult site, trash up to our knees almost in the dorm room. The roommate had moved out of the room because they were very upset with how things were going with living with Lucy. She couldn't locate a toothbrush when we asked her where her toothbrush was. The sheets hadn't been changed on the bed in 3 months. So this is not Lucy's fault. This is really looking at this situation and remembering that question, what do we do now? Can we increase supports? Can we lower demands? We're at a crossroads, or does Lucy need to be pulled out of college? So what we did in Lucy's situation is the first thing we did was we helped Lucy to advocate to reduce her course load. She was taking a whole 5 classes. That is a lot for a young student entering into college, never mind being a neurodiverse student. We also had Lucy reach out to professors in the accommodations office with the help of a support staff. We put releases in place for the staff to be able to communicate with her college advisor so we could catch any issues prior to them becoming bigger. And this was really helpful because no young adult wants their family to always be involved in sort of their day-to-day business as they're trying to become independent. So it was much easier for Lucy to hear from a staff member, hey, your professor has told me you haven't passed in the last couple things, rather than hearing it from her parent. We created a detailed schedule for Lucy to follow, including meal times and study times. She hadn't had a schedule in place for many years due to how capable she was, but this was really helpful for her in a new environment to be able to reflect on. We scheduled in time to tidy up as part of support services, and we also requested from the school a single medical dorm with a shower in the unit. The showering at the dorm was very difficult for Lucy because of her sensory issues, sharing a bathroom with other people at the same time. So her hygiene was really going downhill. And by getting this special unit that had a shower in it, which she was eligible for because of her autism, the staff were able to help her with her showering. One of the biggest helpful things we did to the environment was we automated as many things as we could. So we set up her alarm clock so that it went off every day at the same exact time that she needed to be up, whether or not she set it. It was all set for her, so it just went off. She knew when she had to get up, she didn't have to do anything. We also noticed she wasn't taking her medication, so we got her a medication box that would change colors when she needed to take her pills. So that helped her with not forgetting to take her medication, which ultimately led to helping her with her schoolwork. We also set her television so that it had presets on there so it would shut off at a certain time on school nights. And this allowed for her to be able to go to bed at a reasonable time without having to constantly check the clock. Staff began role playing various situations and working on functional communication skills. And after we were able to get her on track, Lucy was able to complete an associate's degree. So it took a lot of supports. It took, kind of decreasing some of the demands, but she was able to do it when we were able to figure out what it was that she needed in that environment. And sometimes caregivers might not know there's an issue until there's a crisis point. With Lucy's family, they were picking her up once a week for 3 months and didn't notice that there was a problem. And a big reason for this is that oftentimes, as caregivers, we'll ask yes or no questions, which are very easy for an individual to answer, and you're not getting much information back. So, oh, are you safe at college? Yep, I am. Well, what does safe mean, right? Oh, have you made any friends? Yep, I have, but no other information, right? So some of conversation starters are things like, so what's your favorite food in the cafeteria? How are you spending time outside of class? What's the most interesting thing you've learned? And what class is the hardest for you? What's your roommate like? How is the safety in the dorm? How was the club that you tried out? So by asking these open-ended questions, we're really allowing for more information where we can start to kind of assess, okay, well, If you've been at college for 3 months and you've never been to the cafeteria, so you don't know how the food is, then we probably have a situation where we need to figure out what is the barrier here. So, communication that leads to friendship. We talk about levels of discussion a lot with the individuals that we serve. Basically, breaking down communication into steps is easier for people to understand how friendships progress and what topics should be talked about at each level of friendship. So, essentially, first, when you meet someone or you run into them, you have just an acquaintance. After introductions and small talk, this is basically the information surface level conversations. So, hi, how are you? Any plans for this weekend? We're really not getting into anything that's over the top or oversharing at this point. The next level is shared interest or differences being discussed and spending time together where we're now having personal level conversations or sharing emotions. So maybe talking about, oh, I really hate the Red Sox. I really don't like that sports team. And being able to have a active participation, an active conversation where the other person's participating. Once you ensure the friendship is two ways and there's a relationship level, this is trust. So, this is where we're now talking to people. This is where we're now trusting this person. And the final level of having these conversations and having communication is to make friendships a priority. Friendships take time and work, and we always talk about this with individuals. In order to have a friend, you need to be a good friend because nobody is going to keep chasing someone around to be their friend if they're not getting anything back. Active listening. So, obviously, when you're communicating, there is the speaking and there is the listening. And sometimes many people have problem with the active listening. And what is active listening? So, it's listening to understand. It's not listening to overtalk, to debate, or to respond. We need to let the other person finish their statements without rushing them. Then we need to take a moment, pause, digest their words, understand what they say. And we usually suggest when we're working on conversational skills that we should ask questions if we don't understand or paraphrase what that person just said to you and repeat back to them. That way, this is going to avoid any miscommunications. You want to make comments regarding their statements or offer their perspective. It's okay to disagree respectfully. And essentially, by listening in this way and by communicating, as I showed in the slide before, you're going to be able to build on these relationships to have meaningful relationships because the communication is good. One thing we always like to talk about is effective communication between peers. It's very important to allow our friendships to progress as we get to know others. Sometimes we'll find that individuals are so eager to begin a friendship that they'll overshare information that's more appropriate for a personal relationship or for relationships that have trust already. And this can cause the person receiving the information to feel both overwhelmed and that their needs might not be met within the relationship. Here are some role play examples that I give some parents to talk about with their children so that they can hopefully discuss ways that these situations could go differently. So, the first one is Sally and Jenny are in math class together. They've spoken a few times and live in the same dorm. Jenny asks Sally if she wants to grab some dinner with her in the cafeteria and study. Sally agrees. Once the girls grab dinner and sit down, Sally begins telling Jenny about every Pokemon card she owns and the energy types of the Pokemon. She has over 100. So a lot of our individuals with autism, they have their special interests. They have something that really, really is intriguing to them that they could talk about forever. But a lot of other people might not have that same interest. So this is a really good example to say, Sally um, can talk to Jenny about her interest, but maybe Jenny doesn't need to know about 100 different Pokemons and the specific about the Pokemon cards. Maybe she could just tell her it's a shared interest until they get to know each other. A second scenario is Ben and Kate are on the same soccer team. While waiting for practice to begin, Ben asks Kate what she likes to do for fun. Kate says she doesn't like to do anything fun, that she hates her father is no longer involved in her life, and that she was suspended from school the prior week. So, all of these things might be on Kate's mind. They all might be things that Kate is thinking about, but by oversharing this information, it's probably scaring away Ben, and it's a little bit too much right at the beginning of a relationship with somebody to share. It's important to stress that friendships go two ways. It's better to have quality friendships rather than a quantity of friendships that might not be as meaningful. You need to address problems that come up calmly and appropriately because communication is the key to understanding each other. And we all come from all different backgrounds where people are going to communicate differently. A lot of young people, I find that they get jealous if their friends spend more time with other friends or have different hobbies with other friends. This is not normal. Other friendships don't diminish the value of your own friendship. And so it's really important to know that your relationship with this person is stable. It has nothing to do with if this person has a million other friends that have other interests. You deserve to be valued, respected, and listened to as well. And if it's a one-sided friendship, then we need to reevaluate, is this person really a friend? So, in order to know what a friend is, we also have to know what a friend isn't. So, a friend isn't someone or even a good acquaintance they will never bully you. They'll never bribe you to do inappropriate actions for laughs. They're not going to tease or demean you in front of others. They're not going to disregard your feelings. They're not going to abuse you physically, financially, or verbally. They're not going to ask you to buy them items to sustain the friendship. They're not going to get upset when you say no to something, and they're not going to be embarrassed to be seen around you. So it's really hard sometimes to look at friendships and sort of understand if it's a healthy friendship. But by knowing what a friend isn't, it's helpful to know if this person's worth your time or not to continue the relationship. So, where do we find friends? So we have to conduct what's called a preference assessment really on ourselves. So asking yourself, what are activities, ideas, or beliefs that I enjoy doing? Or maybe I enjoyed doing them at one time and I haven't done them in a while. Can I make a list of interests? Would there be other people interested in these activities and are they socially acceptable? Is there a club, community, or virtual group option maybe I can join? And one of the tools that we use a lot with people when we're figuring this out is we call it the likes and dislikes inventory. So it's a very simple sort of list of activities, and we give this to individuals for them to go through and really think about, okay, I really, really don't like sewing. That's not something I'm interested in. I probably wouldn't want to hang out with someone while they were sewing, but maybe I would be into farming. I haven't really done that before. With the idea of going through this list, it's not going to have everything on here, but maybe it can spark some new interests. So finding a community, you can find a community in a variety of ways. The first one, especially if you're at a place like college, is you're in the same environment. So you already have a big thing in common, your location. Friendships with people in the same location are obviously going to be easier to maintain because you have access to that person more. So it's always good to try to get involved in whatever environment you're in to be able to sustain some relationships. Shared interest or activities. So people that like certain sports or maybe they like theater. This is a really good way to find peers. Maybe a shared religious affiliation or a shared culture. A lot of colleges and a lot of towns even have groups for people that are of the same culture or are of the same religion that want to hang out with others that are in their same culture or religion. Shared beliefs can also connect people. And it's important to know that community can look different based on preferences. So sometimes I will get parents that will come and tell me, oh, I just wish that my son would want to make friends in real life, but his only friends are online. Online friendships are a valid thing. In this day and age, a lot of people do things online. So while we don't want someone to isolate all day, and be on the computer or be in an online, virtual reality, we do have to honor that some people, that is what friendships look like to them, and that is what they're comfortable with. It's also great to try something new, and it's great to start with a club or a class or an event that will allow a trial. Many clubs will allow a trial day. Many yoga classes, any sort of classes typically will allow at least one class. And if you don't see an option for that, if you ask about it, usually they're going to say, yeah, come on in and try this. We'd love to have you. Many times trying something new can cause feelings of anxiety or embarrassment, but we need to give it a shot a couple times before we make a decision that it's not for us, unless it feels very punitive. I always tell individuals that when you're at a new activity or you're trying to meet people, you need to put the phone away. Excessive phone usage in a group makes it look like you're unavailable and like you're not interested in communicating with other people. Everyone has a first day with every new activity, and everyone in your activity was in your shoes at one point. So you have to remember that even the person that seems that they've been here since the day the club started, they had a first day as well. And questions are not embarrassing. Asking questions actually helps with you not being embarrassed in the long run, so you can understand how things work in this group. And how do we reduce anxiety surrounding new activities? So it can be helpful to preview where the activity is taking place prior to the actual day to alleviate stress. I know for me, if I'm going into anywhere in Boston, I'm always Google mapping it the day before because I want to make sure where's the parking? If there's no parking, how long am I going to have to walk there to get to where I'm going? I feel comfortable knowing that I have a plan going into that situation. Is there an option to drop by the location and visually see the event occurring prior to attending? We do this a lot at our center in Woburn. We'll have a cooking class every Wednesday, and oftentimes individuals who are interested but hesitant to come into a group event, I invite them to just come by, even if it's only for a minute, even if they just want to walk through and see how the class is going, because it's going to help them feel less anxious about the situation. We always encourage people to ask questions about the activity prior to the event occurring. So what's the schedule of the class like? How many people attend this? What are the age ranges? Things that you want to know as you're visualizing this event and how it's going to go. You want to be prepared to introduce yourself and practice small talk prior to the event if you're out of practice. And definitely it's good to kind of have a couple topics that you've recently researched or kind of thrown off someone as good conversation starters so that you feel more comfortable. You want to practice coping skills prior to the event. So, okay, if I get anxious, I need to remember that I need to take a deep breath. I need to slow down. Maybe I have to count backwards from 10, whatever it is that that person does to make them feel better. And you want to plan an appropriate exit plan if needed. We don't want to assume that this is going to be a horrible situation, but if we are in there and there is, we're not comfortable or we're just not happy to be there, what are we going to say to get out of the situation? It's pretty rude to just stand up and walk out. So having some sort of thing you can say to someone and have that prepared can help you feel more prepared when you're coming into that environment. In reading body language, when we meet people, it's important to notice social cues and body language. If someone's body language shows that they don't want to speak with us and they don't want us around them, then we need to move on. And this can be really hard for some individuals because they want to know why. I talked to this person at the library. I really like them, but they told me to leave them alone. I don't know why. We don't need to know why. They just don't want us around them, and that's okay. But trying to continue to talk to people that don't want us around them is never going to have a good outcome. So boundaries, we talk a lot with the individuals about consent and about boundaries. So basically, what is a boundary? A boundary is an invisible line you draw around yourself to identify what is acceptable behavior. We all have boundaries. By sharing and adhering to our own boundaries, we're respecting ourselves. And by listening and adhering to other people's boundaries, even if they don't make sense to you, we are showing that we respect them. We have worked with a lot of individuals that will say, well, this person might have a boundary, but I don't really care because it doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense. It is not our place to decide if someone's boundary is important to them or not. We just need to respect them. Because if we don't respect them, then that's where we're going to have problems. And some common boundaries that you or someone might have. So, choosing to speak or not speak about certain topics. In general, we always tell individuals it's best to avoid hot button issues, except if you know this person and you feel comfortable and you know that this situation of talking about these issues is not going to cause any sort of fight or make people uncomfortable. So, particularly discussions around religion, politics, wars, things like that can make people feel really uncomfortable. I always tell individuals that nobody will ever catch me talking about any of these topics because typically, if someone brings something up, I'll say something along the lines of, I think there are a lot better things we can talk about that we'll probably have a better conversation about. You can choose to engage in certain activities or not. You can choose to engage with certain substances or not. And a lot of times it's helpful in shared living situations to have house rules, which are agreed upon boundaries. Are we allowed to have visitors over? What is the thought of someone staying overnight? How long can they stay overnight with us? So, really coming up with a roommate about what boundaries that you and the roommate together feel are important. And then talking about consent. So, consent is giving permission for something to happen. Consent includes understanding what you're agreeing to, understanding you have the right to say yes, no, or change your mind, respecting if others do not consent to something and not trying to bribe them to change their mind, because that's really not consensual. And how do you know if someone struggles with communication if they consent to an activity, conversation, or touch? You know by their body language, and that's something that we talk a lot about is just because an individual might not be verbal or maybe they can't communicate effectively does not mean that they don't have consent. Consent, you can tell all over someone's body language if you touch them and they move their arm away, or if you're around them and they keep walking away from you. They are not consenting to you being near them. An example is Gary always comes up and puts both hands on Rachel's shoulders when she's sitting at the library studying without warning. She asks him to stop doing this as it startles her. So she's putting in a boundary in place. Rachel tells Gary she does not want him to touch her at all. So she's not allowing consent. Gary tells Rachel it's a joke and she shouldn't be so sensitive. So, when we're looking at this situation and talking to the individuals, do you think Gary is respecting Rachel's boundary and is this consensual? Gary thinks it's a joke, but clearly Rachel doesn't. So, this is not a consensual interaction. And boundary and consents in college are shared living arrangements. So, when entering adulthood, your peers' social norms and expectation change with the increase of independence. You have to reflect on what you're comfortable with. So, some common situations young adults navigating the world are going to find among peers is the use of recreational or illicit drugs, the use of alcohol, peers engaging in sexual relationships or doing more explicit sexual behaviors, inappropriate language, or inappropriate social media usage. And while you might feel strongly about any of the above, I always have to remind individuals it is not our place to dictate how other people live our life. We want everyone to be safe, but it's not our place to put rules on other people. And so, how can parents support their individuals to be safe? So it's helpful to have the individual come up with a list of personal boundaries prior to entering a situation that might be new or uncomfortable to them. Think of ways to handle these situations that make them comfortable and that respect their personal boundaries. You want to practice various statements that can be said in order to allow the individual to escape from an uncomfortable situation. And review safety protocols and who to call should an unsafe situation occur. You also want to be realistic regarding substance use and sexuality. A lot of parents have taken an all or nothing approach, and this is really not helpful. Oh, you can't have sex at all until you're married. Well, this person might not get married ever. So that's not really a realistic benchmark of when they're able to do this activity. And if people think that it's unattainable, they're going to just do it anyways, and they're most likely not going to communicate about it. It's the same with substance use. Growing up, everyone is taught, in general that you can't, you shouldn't do drugs, you really shouldn't drink that much. But having an all or nothing approach to nope, you should never drink and you should never do anything is most likely not realistic. It's talking about safety and how do you moderate this and how do you use maybe a substance like alcohol in an appropriate way that doesn't harm you. And you want to look into ongoing education surrounding adult topics for individuals, including sexuality and internet safety and dating. In this day and age, so much stuff is done on the internet, particularly with dating. It's really important to know the do's and don'ts of online dating. And so these are some of the things that we tell the individuals that they can say if they're in an uncomfortable situation. So I don't like how blank makes me feel, but thanks for the offer. Those TikTok videos made me feel bad for those people. I'd rather not watch them. I saw this other video I liked today, though. I don't want to feel sick after doing. I have to work or go to school later, but I hope you have fun. No thanks. Blank just really isn't my thing. Not tonight, thanks. Maybe I'll take you up on that offer at another time. I really don't like what can do to my health, so I'd rather not. Would you mind if you go do whatever it is in your own personal area and not the common area? It can make me feel uncomfortable or unsafe. So by having some simple sort of conversations that you can say to people can help you feel more comfortable with putting in that boundary, but also with making sure that you're not peer pressured into doing something that you're not quite ready to do, or maybe that you don't want to do at all. All right, so any questions?
So I'm checking the chat. I think it's such a great idea to talk about scripting answers and taking time to practice when you're going to be uncomfortable. I just heard you saying that, and I thought that's something that I think could be very helpful for everybody when you have a young person who is going to be going into a new environment. Let's see. So Jen says, I'd love to hear more suggestions. Oh, we should probably stop recording for people to ask questions. That's a good call, Pat. Thank you. So thank you, Christina. And Jen has said,